is up, everybody? Hope you enjoyed the brand new intro. Hope you all are...
Wonderful.
I'm wonderful. I am your host, JBH, and you are tuning in to yet another fight brief... Oh, wait. I did it the right way. Another fight briefing. Tonight we're going to be talking about UFC Copenhagen, or UFC Fight Night 160, or UFC on ESPN Plus 18. That's right, Boss Kogar, new intro. That is right. Pete Ophelia, LOL, Sean Hart, sup JBH, and all in chat. Sup Flat Earth, Val, Mike Riley, Staley 02, Flat Earth Deacon, Michael Anzalone, Bush 420, Joke Savage. All right, let's get right into it, guys. Tonight we're talking about UFC Copenhagen. This is going to be the debut for the UFC in a new European country, Denmark to be exact. And the promotion is going to roll into Copenhagen at the Royal Arena, I believe it's called, for UFC Fight Night 160. It is Hermansson versus Cannonier. And with that being said, let's talk about all the fights that are on the card tonight, Saturday night. First on the card, we have Nicolas Dalby versus Alex Oliveira. They will be starting off the main card. And then we have Michael Oleksiejczuk versus Ovince Preux, or OSP. Ian Cutelaba versus Khalil Rountree. Gunnar Nelson versus Gilbert Burns. And Mark Madsen versus Danilo. Belluardo is your co-main event for the night. And then your main event, Jack Hermansson versus Jared Cannonier. So here's the thing about this this fight night, guys. I saw a lot of people talking in the chat during our last show on Wednesday, yesterday, about how they weren't too hyped up because of some of the names on the card, but I think I can give you guys a reason after tonight's fight briefing to be hyped up. I do want to point one thing out. Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman has been finalized for UFC 245, so make sure you guys keep your eye out for that, even though it's not, about tonight's fight briefing. I just figured you guys would want to know. So, despite this being a European fight night show, most of which are traditionally weaker cards by the UFC, Super Chat, PBR.
Hey, what up, motherfuckers? Waving.
What up, PBR? I've got my, I don't have any wine tonight, but I've got Mike's Hard Lemonade. I went to CVS today, and I saw it there on sale, and I decided, I haven't had that in a while. Last time I did, I got very drunk. And, why not? So, cheers to all of you guys. Before we get this show started, I want to give a shout out to some of our sponsors at BetDSI. Link in the description. Promo code MMA-Hole for 100% bonus match, as well as $25 as a welcome bonus. Make some picks on the fights this weekend that we'll be talking about. Theragun, link in the description. Get the best massage therapy you will ever find, an all-in-one tool. Sticker Mule, if you own a business, event, or organization and are looking for better promotional and marketing materials, make sure you head over to the link in the description. They're doing constant deals, constant promotions, so keep your eye out over there. Real Bearded Men, if you want your beard to look as swole and as sexy as Mystic Moss's, head over to Real Bearded Men, link in the description, promo code MMA-Hole for 15% off of your entire order. And of course, Timeless CBD, promo code MMA-Hole, 20% off. Get anything you need, any of your CBD needs. Speaking of CBD, guys, let me just say, Timeless sent us our monthly sponsorship products, and he's come out with some new stuff. We've got a Timeless breakfast blend. Yes, it's coffee. There is now coffee laced with 500 milligrams of CBD. So if you guys are interested in a CBD laced coffee, my assumptions are you still get the caffeine fix, but it doesn't make you jittery because of the CBD. So head over there to the link in the description if you want some of that. And hemp flower. Now, I was very excited about this. I don't know if Mystic Moss was as excited because he's not really into the whole smoking deal, but I was very excited about this. The only problem is I don't know how to roll it. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But once I do, it's cherry wine, it says on the top, whatever that means. So Very excited about that. So head over there, link in the description. Let's get started on
Fight Briefing.
All right. The first fight of the night. Now, take a look at this. Take a look at these faces right here, guys. Look, look, they're glitching. Oh my God. Let me fix that for you guys real quick. Nah, they're still glitching. Man. Oh, there we go. All right. First fight of the night, Nicolas Dalby versus Alex Oliveira. They look like they're practically kissing over here in the frame right above me, but yeah, I injected in my veins, King K. Thanks. I'll be sure to do that and melt it down. Let's talk about Alex Oliveira first. Alex Oliveira is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. Pro MMA record 27-1 with 2 no contests. His last fight was back in April against Mike Perry, where he did unfortunately take a loss. Now, Alex Oliveira is still a great athlete, even though he did take a loss to Mike Perry. The guy has a lot of power behind his striking. He has great range. He's a freaking great grappler. We've seen that in a lot of his past fights. And we've seen a rather highly skilled submission art out of him. So, all of those things are high up in the strengths of Alex Oliveira. He's got a pretty solid chin. He's not easy to knock out, but can be knocked out. So keep that in mind. But as far as his weaknesses are concerned, I think it would mostly lead to the fact that he's not a very consistent fighter. And what I mean by this is he's had some great fights on his record against people like Pederlosi? Is it Pederlosi? Ryan LaFleur, Carlos Condit. But as I mentioned before, he had that fight against Mike Perry where there was that loss. And some could argue that he wasn't exactly the same fighter in that fight than what we've seen in Alex Oliveira in the past. His opponent, Dalby, he is currently on a 3-fight winning streak. Unlike Oliveira, his pro MMA record is 17-3-1 with 1 no contest, and his last fight was in June to Ross Houston, but it was not in the UFC. It was CWFC. So Nicolas Dalby is going to be coming back in here after a fight outside of the UFC. Now, he's not new to the UFC. He did debut back in 2015 against against Elizo Zaleski dos Santos was his name. And he did win that fight via split decision, but it was a very close split decision. He also fought Darren Till, but it was very raw Darren Till that we got to see in that fight, and he was losing Dalby. Dalby was losing that fight, but Till, of course, dislocated his shoulder in that fight, and Dalby inevitably took it. So he's gone 3-1 since then with 1 no contest, and his only loss coming to current UFC fighter is Carlo Pederlosi, however you like to say his name. Now, if you use MMA math here, and I know a lot of you guys are not on board with using MMA math, but if you use MMA math, Pederlosi was violently knocked out by Oliveira last year, so kind of put 2 and 2 together there. But I like I said, I know a lot of people aren't really on board with it, so I get it. Just think about it. It's something pretty important that you should probably factor in or keep in mind here. So let's talk about Dalby's fighting style for a minute. Dalby is an excellent kickboxer. He's extremely technical. He's extremely dangerous with his legs. In fact, his kickboxing has actually aided him a lot in his fights in the past. He's great at all ranges, whether it's close or distant. It doesn't matter. Dalby can handle it. And against pretty much all of his opponents. He's got 6 KOs or TKOs on his record, or in his career, which is also something pretty impressive. He's got, like I said, great striking. He's got a lot of incredible technique in his striking, but he does have weaknesses as well. Just like Oliveira, like Oliveira that has weaknesses, he's got weaknesses. Dalby's not the greatest athlete in comparison to a lot of other fighters in his division. And he's not the greatest against explosive opponents, and Oliveira can actually come at Dalby in an explosive way. His cardio, Dalby, is kind of subpar, and I really worry that this could be his downfall against someone like Oliveira, because Oliveira, if he knows that about Dalby, can come in pretty explosive if he wants to, and kind of get that upper hand in the fight against Dalby. So bottom line for this fight, guys, that being said, I think so long as Dalby stays perfectly strategic in his fight throughout the entire 3 rounds, I think he can monitor his cardio, or if he can monitor his cardio really well, that might aid him. This will, of course, aid him in coming into the fight with Oliveira with a lot of incredible power. He does have a little home field advantage here as well, which we've seen has helped fighters in the past. Now, just because Dalby's an incredible fighter does not mean I think he's going to knock Oliveira out. We've seen some great skill from Oliveira in the past as well. If Cowboy brings this fight to the ground and he puts a lot of pressure on Dalby from the top, then it's likely that this fight is going to end right then and there. That being the case, I really want to pick Dalby for this fight, but I think it's going to be an extremely close decision, and I can't help but think about the fact that Oliveira sorely needs this win. He's coming off of 2 losses here. So, coming off of 2 losses, you got to think. I worry that Dalby knows this. He knows he's coming off of 2 losses, and he's going to get a little too confident and perhaps bite off a little more than he can chew. So, I'm going to have to go with Oliveira on this one. And I kind of want to see it happen with a submission. I think I'd like to see this fight end with a submission. So let me know who you guys have in the chat. Do you have Nicolas, Dalby, or Alex Oliveira? Now, let's move over and see. T-Bird says, mental game, Stalio 2, bring back Connor. King K, I think the guy who gets his hand raised will be the winner. Flat Earth Deacon says, Alex, Heavy Microgrow, Dalby. Pete Ophelia, I'm shadowboxing at Mexicans right now. Just please one ASMR video. Nah, I don't do that. Andre Villafranca says Dalby. Dalby says Heavy Microgrow. Cowboy for the win says Pulse. Dalby by TKO says Drunk Savage. But I think Drunk Savage, Nick, Brokeback Mountain for the win. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the next fight here. The second fight of the main card is Ovince St. Preux, or OSP, versus, I love saying this. Oh!
You know, I just feel so special. I've got a special face. Attention is short, bust to outer space. Mine in a special place. GSP abducted me, I'm from an alien race. Special face. Special face.
Life on autopilot.
Special face.
Woo!
Smile.
Well. Smile back to you, life. You're the best. Moving on to the next fight of the card. OSP versus Oleksiejczuk. Did I say it right? Oleksiejczuk. All right. Let's talk about Ovince St. Preux for a minute. Now, I know a lot of people are riding high on OSP, but I think right now it is safe to say that OSP is falling out of his prime. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all the OSP fans out there. Sorry. Here's the thing. OSP is currently on a 2-fight losing streak. His pro MMA record is 23-13-0, and his last fight was against Nikita Krylov, who we got to see fight, I think, last card, or a card before that? No, I think it was the last card. And he did lose to a rear naked choke. Now, here's the thing. OSP was an incredible athlete. He's one of the best. He's got amazing counters, great takedowns, good ground game. He's very well-rounded, to say the least. The problem now is that he's 36 years old. He's got a decade of fights under his belt. So, you know, kind of give it to him there. He's got a decade of fights. And you could argue that he is fallen out of his prime. I think it's fair to argue that he's fallen out of his prime. If we take a look back to 4 of his last fights, 3 of those fights he's been knocked down in, which it's not really a great statistic for a fighter. He was dropped by Tyson Pedro, although OSP did submit him at the end of that fight. Ilir Latifi dropped him and submitted him, actually. And Reyes damn near knocked him out. And then you've got Jimmy Manawa, who KO'd him remarkably back in 2017, which was just 2 years ago. So, needless to say, I think OSP has really led himself into the role of a really hard-headed, really strong, tough gatekeeper. It is what it is. I think where I give him a little bit of an advantage here is he does have a 6-inch reach advantage over his opponent, and he is a little taller, but sometimes the height doesn't really matter. You're the same height on the ground if the fight ever went to the ground. So I think the reach advantage is where he really has that advantage. OSP also has some extremely strategic counters when he uses them properly, which I mentioned before, and he's got pretty decent ground game. So it's not like he's completely lost in this fight, but I do worry that perhaps he's slowed down a little bit. Now, Alexia Check is on 16 wins. His career is on a 16 fight win streak. His record is 14-2-0 with 1 no contest, and his last fight was against some guy named Antigulov, who it was in the UFC. I'm not going to try and pronounce his first name. It's like Gajimrod Antigulov, but he did win by an uppercut and ground and pound, and it was within the first round. This guy's a freaking monster inside the cage. Now, Alexia Check is extremely dangerous. He's a wildly dangerous fighter he's currently 2-0 in the UFC, but like I said, he's got 16 wins in his entire professional career. The no contest fight was a fight that he originally won against Khalil Rountree. I'm not sure if any of you guys saw that fight, but then he tested positive for clomiphene or whatever you call it. He tested positive for that, so that's pretty unfortunate. But he's only 24 years old. The guy's still a kid, He's still reaching his prime here, but so we have to keep in mind he still has a lot of experience in the cage regardless of how young he is. And I think this fight is also going to be his chance to kind of bump himself up higher in the rankings of the light heavyweight division. So he really has to capitalize on a fight like this. Now, as far as his fighting style goes, Alexia Check has incredible striking power. He does seem to run a lot, though, and that could be a little bit of a problem. His striking is unpredictable, which is great. It puts him at an advantage in his fights because his opponents usually never know where he's going to strike. A lot of fighters are very technical. He's not. He will go wherever's open. But the problem is he does run from his opponents when it comes to his defense. So if a fighter's coming at him with strikes, he likes to back up, run around the cage. He doesn't really use a lot of head movement, a lot of footwork, and that could be a little bit of a problem in a fight like this against someone like OSP. So, it is what it is. I think he still appears to be an incredible fighter here. He seems to have a relatively good chin. He's only been knocked out once in his career, but other than that, he's been able to really hold his own. And I think OSP might catch on to his tactics if he continues to run. That might be the only part where he has a little bit of a disadvantage. But bottom line for this fight, I really feel that OSP is going to appear to be slower than he was a few years ago. Like I said, he is falling out of his prime, and I think that's really worrying against a striker as fast and as powerful as Alexia Check. It's just, you just can't be slow with a powerful striker like that. You have to be on your A game, and I'm worried that OSP might not be able to show that. I think this is going to be, it's not going to be impossible for OSP. It's not going to be an impossible fight, but he certainly has, some semblance of opportunity here. I'm just not convinced that he can survive Alexia Check's striking and power and stuff like that. So the power behind his hands is pretty brutal, and I think he can really catch OSP at the right timing and the right technique and perhaps knock OSP down. So in this fight, I'm going to go Alexia Check by KO TKO. Let me know who you guys have in the chat room. All right. The BBC is weakening, says Drunk Savage. 2 joints says Sean Biddy brother. Jim Moore says he's going to burn him up, get the button smashed, KO. Whatever that means, man. Drunk Savage 2 joints, they get into you to your prison pocket. What's up, Jesse? What's up, Kevin Costa? Lexi Royds for the win, says Nick C.33. Flatter Things says OSP because Pulse said so. Russian all day. Check. Lapeu, whatever this says. Who do you have in Jeremy Yair rematch? Oh, this is different. I explained this a couple days ago. I had Yair for my first pick, but after seeing what I saw, it appears to me like Yair is probably a little nervous with the situation. So I'll give you my pick when I get ready to do the fight briefing for that fight. How about that? All right, we're going to move on to the next fight over here. Next fight, I love this fight coming up, guys. Ian Cutelaba versus Khalil Rountree, the saber-toothed tiger. How many of you guys watch X-Men? Saber-tooth versus Khalil Rountree. I freaking love this fight. I love it so much. And these are two heavy hitters. These are two very smart fighters. Cutelaba is coming off of a loss. He's 15-4-0 right now with 1 no contest, and his last fight was against Glover Teixeira, who is a submission artist, so it's no surprise that Cutelaba did end up taking a rear naked choke loss to Cutelaba. Now, these are two of the most powerful 205ers on the UFC roster, and I would honestly be surprised if this fight goes the distance at all. I'd be shocked, because this fight should be finished. Now, if this battle between two of the most powerful 205ers in the UFC roster lasts more than a round, the first round, then you know what? I say the second round. I say it might go the second round. That's where I'm gonna go. It's not gonna go the distance for sure, but I say the second round now. Cutelaba does have 2 decisions on his record, and the way that he fights is fueled by anger and aggression and just, like an unleashment of all of those things. And Cutelaba's the type of fighter who's either going to go swinging in for the fences or go completely strategic. You just never know with him. It just depends on who he's fighting, but we've seen both sides of him before. What makes this fascinating is that Cutelaba probably has a relatively simple way to win this one if he plays his cards right. Although he does prefer to strike in a predominantly absurd fashion, he's also a pretty excellent wrestler on the ground. So I would say he's pretty well rounded. He's got insanely powerful takedowns, a dominating top game, both of which really aid him in the fight. So that's where I stand with Cutelaba. I don't sleep on him one bit. Now, when it comes to Khalil Rountree, he's coming off of 1 win, which is excellent for him. He's 8-3-0 with 1 no contest, and his last fight was against Eric Anders, but it was against Eric Anders, and it was a unanimous decision win. But nonetheless, Rountree did go the distance in his last fight. The majority of his fights have been finished in the first round, so you have to give that to Rountree. Now, as far as Rountree's fighting style is concerned, I think he's shown in the past that his ground game is painfully lacking. And I'll tell you why. He's a great striker, predominantly heavy striker. Most of his professional career wins have been by finish with his strikes. Andrew Sanchez simply spammed takedowns in their fight and took a completely comfortable decision win when Rountree was trying to get, Sanchez to the ground. And Tyson Pedro easily dealt with him once he took him down. So you got to think, Rountree's great on the feet, but Cutelaba is well-rounded. He's got excellent takedowns. So there's a clear weakness, a clear disadvantage here for Rountree. Now, Rountree was also beaten by Alexia Check, who's earlier on the main card, and it was largely in the clinch. So there you go again with the grappling, the wrestling, things like that. Huge weaknesses for him, and that's another strong area for Cutelaba. He's great in the clinch. He's freaking amazing. Now, Johnny Walker didn't finish Khalil on the ground or with wrestling or anything. He knocked him out. So now, not only do we know that Khalil Rountree has a weakness on the ground, has a weakness in the clinch, but his chin can be found by his opponents, which can be a little bit of a problem for him. So I think, bottom line for this fight, I think if Cutelaba doesn't go into the fight immediately trading blows with Rountree, if he doesn't go swinging for the fences, I think he might have an opportunity here. He can't just blow his load in the first few seconds. He does hit hard. And I mentioned that before, but he's also got a little bit of a reach disadvantage here, which he has to be careful of. He's not quite as relaxed on the feet as Rountree. He's a little more stiff. Rountree is much more relaxed, especially when it comes to exchanging on the feet. So I think that could be dangerous for Cutelaba. That's something Cutelaba is going to have to pay attention to. But in the end, though, I'm still going to have to go with Cutelaba. I firmly stand with the fact that nothing that Rountree has shown in his past suggests that he's got enough to really fend off Cutelaba from close range. So whether that's in the clinch or takedown defense, and even if he can clip Cutelaba, I just don't see that it's going to be like a one-punch KO job, and then we see Cutelaba getting inside and dumping him before he can follow up. I don't see any of that happening. So stylistically, I think this should be Cutelaba's fight. So let me know who you guys have in the chat. Do you have Ian Cutelaba or Khalil Rountree? I am interested in knowing. All right, King K says, I'll take Cannonier by BBC. We're not at Cannonier yet. Hey, Jesse. Hey, Dark Dimension. Let's see. Crumpty Dome, when I doubt, go with Black Guy. Bush 420 Hermansson by BWC. You're so wrong on this, says Pulse. Maybe. Pedophilia, where's Wade? Wade is currently watching the Rangers game and the Mets game. So Wade is definitely not watching Fight Briefing tonight, even though he said he would. He's definitely not watching. So everyone say hi to Wade in the chat for when he watches the replay, because when the Rangers and the Mets are on, there's no such thing as Fight Briefing. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We've got Gunnar Nelson versus Gilbert Burns. I'm sure a lot of you guys are a little excited for this, especially Gunnar Nelson back on the card. I know Mystic Moss is kind of excited for this one. Nelson is currently on a one-fight losing streak. His pro MMA record is 17-4-1, and his last fight was against Leon Edwards, and it was a loss by split decision. Now, initially Gunnar Nelson was set to face Thiago Alves in this fight, but Alves had to pull out due to injury, unfortunately, so now he will be facing Burns. Now, I would argue that Alves was probably the easier fight for him, but now his job just got a little tougher. That being said, given that Burns is coming into this fight on late notice, which is about 2-week notice, give or take, it would seem like a relatively safe bet that Nelson is probably going to have an advantage in conditioning, simply because Nelson has had that ability to train a lot longer than Burns has for this fight. Burns has gassed out in the past, and particularly when he's forced into striking exchanges, which Nelson is also very good at. It puts Nelson at a huge advantage in this department. That problem for Nelson is that if Burns does, get him onto his back, Nelson's not dangerous at all. We've seen this before. So that's something that Burns should take into account. That's not to say that Nelson doesn't have the grappling skills. It just means that Nelson could be a little more vulnerable if Burns decides to take this fight to the ground, especially against this particular opponent. Now, we saw when he fought Damian Maia, when he fought Leon Edwards, Rick Story, Alex Oliveira, when we saw him fight all these guys, all these past opponents, they've had a lot of success when getting Nelson onto his back, and I think Burns is going to pay very close attention to that. So that is a huge disadvantage for Burns, for Nelson. But overall, I think Nelson, he could quite possibly have a little bit of an advantage here, especially on the feet against someone like Burns. So let's talk about Burns, because we don't really know much about him, right? Burns is currently on a 3-fight winning streak. He's 16-3-0, and his last fight was in August against Oleksiejczuk. We actually saw this fight. So Burns hasn't quite lived up to his early hype. He is only on a 3-fight win streak, but that's more than you can say for a lot of the fighters in the UFC right now. So given that Burns fought at 155 pounds for the early part of his career, I think it's safe to say that he's not the biggest welterweight on the roster. But don't let that fool you. He does pack a lot of power here. He puts heavy pressure on his opponents. He has an advantage on the ground, and he's incredibly strong, right? So keep in mind that we've seen Nelson hurt. We've seen Nelson knocked down by strikes in his past fights. That being said, he's still got the veteran position on the feet, but he has a chin that can be found, and Burns could use that to his advantage, and that could be dangerous for Nelson. Burns got knocked out by Dan Hooker. We saw that about a year or so ago, and his last fight against Oleksiejczuk, it wasn't the most admirable position for him to be in. So he had a lot of problems with the striking, and the only way we really saw some semblance of salvation for him was by getting Konchenko into a grappling match, which is going to be his salvation in this fight. I promise you that. If Burns gets Nelson to the ground and he can get Nelson onto his back, that's going to be the salvation. So bottom line for this fight, I think that these are two incredibly high-level grapplers we're discussing. I'm not saying that Nelson's bad on the ground. He's not. He's just bad on his back. Nelson's top game is extremely dangerous. He can put a lot of pressure on his opponents. He's got a rock-solid mount, heavy strikes from that position, and I think he's an extremely vicious finisher with his chokes. So all of those things can really aid Nelson in this fight, and Burns is going to have to pay attention to that. In the end, I am going to have to lean towards Nelson here purely because we've seen Burns by counters on the feet before, and Nelson is completely capable of giving those counters to Burns, and his cardio should be a little more superior since he has a little bit more conditioning behind his belt or under his belt for this fight, since Burns did come in on a 2-week notice. So I think Nelson's going to completely pick apart Burns. He's going to pick him apart from a range, and I think perhaps on his back kind of give him problems. So I'm going to go with Nelson on this one. Let me know who you guys have in the chat for Nelson versus Burns. All right, CC 2.0, Yo Flat Channel had some good info. Heavy Micro, I trust the briefing. I'm with JBH on this one. Whoop, whoop. Thank you. Let's see. Poster's Director says he's the only likable fighter on the SBG roster. Henry Galusha, you guys are wonderful, wonderful. You're wonderful, wonderful.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Drunk Savage, DB Cooper thinks Moss and JBH are mad at him. No! We don't get mad at anybody. Ain't nobody got time for that. You think we have time to get mad at people? The fuck? We got a show to run. We got a business to run. We don't have time to be mad at people. Jesus. Don't even. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. Now, UFC didn't provide me with the picture of Mark Madsen, so look at this. Like a pro I am. Anyways, Mark Madsen versus Danilo Belluardo is the co-main event of the evening. Now let's just talk about this one a little bit. All right, Madsen is currently on an 8-fight win streak. He's 8-0-0. He's an undefeated fighter in his professional record. His last fight was in June, but it was an OFN against a guy named Patrick Nielsen, and he did win by submission. Now, this fight throws me off a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I'll tell you why. Madsen is making his UFC debut, right? So you've got a debut fighter against Belluardo, who's 0-1. Debut fighter, 0-1. And that is your co-main event, ladies and gentlemen. So, now I can only think of a few reasons for this. First, Denmark, of course, doesn't have a lot of fighters to throw on this card. They are debuting in Denmark, and, you know, the UFC is known for throwing homegrown fighters onto the card. So, I could think that maybe that's one of the reasons that they're throwing this together. And second, Madsen is an Olympic silver medalist, so the UFC kind of feels that maybe he can make a quick name for himself out of that. But I'm not really buying that this is a co-main event material type of fight. Like, a UFC debut fighter and an 0-1 fighter. So, nonetheless, it's happening. So, we're just going to have to deal with this. So, let's just get right into it. Whatever the reason. This is your co-main event. Now, even though this is Madsen's UFC debut, as I just mentioned, he's actually been fighting for the last 6 years. So, okay, now we can give him a little more credit here. He took a break from the sport to compete in the Olympics. Like I said, he just got the silver medalist. That being said, he could be seen as quite a high-level prospect if he plays his cards right. Now, let's talk about his fighting style for a minute. Madsen has a combination of TKO stoppages, submissions, and decisions under his belt. So the dude seems like a pretty big 155-pound athletic specimen, in my opinion. He's got an incredible wrestling background. The guy's a heavy striker. He's got heavy striking power, excellent ground game. He likes to slam his opponents on the ground. We've seen that before. Fighters pick him up, slam him on the ground. That's one of his favorite moves. And he puts a hell of a lot of pressure on his opponents when he's on the ground. So naturally, there has to be some question, given that he's such a high-level athlete. How is his cardio? Can he be knocked out? These are the questions that run through at least my head. And to answer that, we haven't really seen either of those things come to play here. Given that he has an incredible wrestling background, I think it would be safe to assume that his cardio is pretty good. But we haven't really been given the opportunity to really test that to this point. And his chin still remains to be unseen. So those are two things that we're going to have to look out for. But other than that, he seems to be like a pretty high-level athlete coming into this game. Now, Belluardo is coming off of a loss right now. His pro MMA record is 12-4-0. And his last fight was to Joel Alvarez, which was a loss to ground and pound. This is the 0-1 in the UFC fighter. Now, this will mark Belluardo's second appearance in the UFC. Like I said, the last time he fought was in June. So this is going to be the second time we're going to see him in the cage. He did look good in the opening round of his last fight against Alvarez, but Alvarez did proceed to put this guy on the back, drop some bombs on him, and then boom, he won with a TKO. So it's pretty unfortunate for someone like Belluardo, but you know, that it was his first fight in the UFC. Perhaps there was maybe some octagon shock. Who knows? But he did go, you know, on his back, which is a little bit of a concern here against someone like Madsen. But we'll see. Now, I did go back and look at some of his past fights. I looked at his highlight reel, and I gotta say, the guy's a pretty solid striker. I can give him some credit there. He's got some heavy power behind his hands there. And the only problem I honestly see is I worry that he's not as athletically versatile as Madsen is. Madsen is, like I said, a high-level athlete. So that's my only real concern there. We don't see much with regard to his ground game. He doesn't really go on the ground all that often. So we don't really know if he can really hold much of his own. All of his losses are finishes, so we know he can be finished. And he's only gone the distance in 3 of his professional fights, which could be a good or bad thing, depending on how his style of fighting precedes him, but it's a little worrying. So I just don't feel that he's on Madsen's level, and it's kind of clear that he appears to be a lot slower as well. So bottom line for this fight, I'm going to say the fact that Alvarez was easily able to pass guard and pound him out becomes more worrying when you consider that Madsen is a huge fan of picking up his opponents and slamming them to the ground. That being said, that's probably the approach Madsen's going to take here. He knows that can be a weakness with Belluardo, and he'll probably end up doing that. So I just don't see the Madsen having any issues there. He's up against an athlete that's super far below his athleticism. I wouldn't say super far, but definitely far below his athleticism. And he's an opponent who clearly shows a weak spot in his fighting style. So especially after his last fight, he lost his UFC debut, which is not great. So assuming that he doesn't get wrapped up in the awe of being in the octagon for his UFC debut for the first time, I really think that Belluardo he's gonna put Belluardo onto his back for an early TKO. So my pick is gonna have to be Madsen by KO TKO on this one. So I know you guys probably don't care about the co-main event, but let me know anyways. Who do you guys have? Do you have Belluardo or do you have Madsen for the win here? Let me know. All right. Yeah, he's going to pound out that booty. Sean Hart says, thanks, bro. This channel helps with my depression. That's great. I hope we can help in some way, man. Let's see here. Whoever JBH says will win says Nick 3 or C33. Post says, guy on the left looks like he would be in Adolf's regime. I hope he gets pounded out. JBH, these bums haven't done enough for you to talk this long about them. Well, that's what I'm saying. Listen, I got to do my research, you know. I got to do my research. I got to give you guys something, you know. Drunk Savage, I'm too angry to manage. Skunk Average is a fat hillbilly. Bosco Girl laughing in the chat. Sean Hart, I didn't say that, JBH. Drunk Savage CC 2.0 whiskey. Mr. Tokyo, weird co-main, but okay, yeah, listen. I just realized Mr. Hermansson is on our co-main, so it's gonna be Belluardo versus Hermansson here instead of Mark Madsen. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. Hermansson, yeah, look at this. Look at that. Belluardo versus Hermansson. And then you've got Hermansson versus Cannonier. All right, anyways. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? Right? Let's move on. Anyways, main event of the evening. Your
Main event of the evening.
But first, we have
I've got 50 likes. You've got 50 likes.
We've got 50 likes. MMA-Holes 50 likes.
I've got 50 likes.
Put your fists in the chat.
We've got 50 likes.
MMA-Holes 50 likes.
I've got 50 likes. You've got 50 likes.
We've got 50 likes. MMA-Holes 50 likes.
The dislikes can choke on a dick.
All right. Last fight last and the main fight of the night here, guys. We have Jack Hermansson versus Jared Cannonier, the main event of the evening. I'm going to fly through this, get your guys' pick, because I'm going to piss my pants right now. All right. Hermansson currently on a 4-fight winning streak, pro MMA record of 24-0. His last fight was in April against Ronaldo Sosa, which he won. Yay! Good job, Jack Hermansson. First and foremost, when it comes to Hermansson, I think that he has a great reach advantage here. He's 6'1". He's long, he's lanky, he's got a 77.5-inch reach, and even though he's got incredible length, I think it's safe to remember that I'm multitasking. I'm talking to you guys, and I'm moving something around at the same time. Even though he's got incredible length, we have to remember that he's only going to have that half-inch reach advantage over Cannonier here. Cannonier also has some pretty long arms, so it's not like a huge reach advantage. Secondly, Hermansson has the ability to push a relatively fair pace. He has the ability to use his cardio to his advantage. So I think if we use his fight against Jacare as a prime example, Jacare doesn't really struggle with cardio that much, and he was struggling with Hermansson. So that's great for Hermansson. That looks really great for him. When it comes to Hermansson's fighting style, he's a great grappler. He choked out Branch, who's a BJJ black belt. I submitted Jacare, or almost submitted Jacare. I'm sorry. I really got to pee, guys. He almost submitted Jacare, and he has a history of making other fighters kind of tap earlier on in their career. So here's where Hermansson's going to give Cannonier a run for his money. Cannonier usually does most of his best work from close range. So the last time that he fought at a longer range striker was when he fought Dominic Reyes, and I think we can all agree that he made taking Cannonier from a distance look ridiculously easy. So it's not, now I'm not saying that that Hermansson has Reyes' power. He doesn't, but he's still an extremely heavy striker, and he keeps his range, and he's technical, which can all be weaknesses for Cannonier. So that's on the feet. Let's talk about what happens if the fight goes to the ground. If the fight goes to the ground, we've seen Cannonier on the ground again against his past opponents, and never against a grappler with the arm length of Hermansson. So all of his opponents has had a little bit more of a reach disadvantage against Cannonier. Hermansson's not going to have that. So Hermansson could be deemed the more dangerous grappler here. So I'm sure you could argue that Cannonier fought Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira is a submission artist, as I mentioned in one of the previous fight breakdowns. And they did go to the ground, and he did hold his own. But in the end, Glover still ended up taking the win there. Cannonier is currently on a 2-fight win streak. His pro MMA record is 12-4-0, I believe. Yes, 12-4-0. His last fight was May 11th against Anderson Silva. So one thing that Cannonier and Hermansson have in common is that they both fought Branch. And, coming into their careers, the difference is that Cannonier stepped in as a late replacement, and he still knocked the guy out. He still took the win. I was about to say wind. This is where my head is. I have to be so bad. So just weeks after beating Branch, Cannonier did pick up one of the biggest wins of his career when he TKO'd Anderson Silva, who was pretty difficult for people to fight, with the leg kicks. Nonetheless, so that's freaking awesome. So he's a pretty fascinating clash of styles, given the differing approaches from both of these fighters. Cannonier's biggest strengths, of course, come in his striking power. He's won 7 of 12 wins by KO or TKO, which is great. He's fairly well-rounded, although I wouldn't list him as one of the best grapplers in his division. Super chat.
Imagine a rushing waterfall, gallons of water. Ocean wave.
Yeah. All right, drunk. Thank you. But Cannonier is technical, so he's not one of the best grapplers in his division, but he's definitely technical. He throws heavy hands in most of his fights, and he has the ability to be patient and to hunt his opponents down. So bottom line for this fight, I feel that even though Cannonier hits hard, he's gonna find it hard to land something on Hermansson here, because Hermansson's pretty good with ranges. If he does land Cannonier, then he's gonna have some trouble finding Hermansson's chin. I know Santos found Hermansson's chin in their previous fight, but I believe Santos went in a rush, and he hits way harder than Cannonier does. And even still, Hermansson wasn't completely knocked unconscious in that fight, so I wouldn't use that against Hermansson at all. I do believe Cannonier has the ability here to come in at Hermansson with a vicious barrage of strikes, which will aid him in the fight because Hermansson wouldn't be ready for something like that. But at the same, honestly, like, I can't get the image of Cannonier being TKO'd by Reyes out of my mind, especially since it was done with such a similar fighting style of that of Hermansson's. I do feel that Cannonier has a puncher's chance here, but throwing the fact that Hermansson has better cardio, better range, and a better ground game, I think this is Hermansson's fight to take home. So my pick is indeed Jack Hermansson by KO TKO. Super chat.
Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Nick C33. You guys are driving me insane. I'm going to get your picks real quick. Let me know in the chat who you have. Do you have Jack Hermansson or Jared Cannonier? And then we're gonna close this off. Let's see. Toss-up fight should be fire. I agree, DDS. Waterworld was a shite film. JBH still well informed. Thanks to Beers. Andre Villafranca says Hermansson via submission in round 1. Chrome Genome says the black guy. Sean Hart splash. Gene Pinkard, Tarzan shit. The Joker RNC says DDS Aquatics. D-Russ. He are manson. Joker mofo. Hermansson says Drunk Savage. Cannonier by KO. Water says Pete Ophelia. Everyone dropping the water in the chat. Chrome Dome. I got Blade. What? Herman says Sean Hart. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Fight Briefing. I hope you guys found this very insightful, informative, and if you didn't, you can suck my cock. Anyways, I'm excited for the fights this week, and make sure you tune in. It is going to be an earlier card. Also, like I said, Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman has been finalized for UFC 244. One last shout out to our sponsors, BetDSI, link in the description, promo code MMA-Hole, 100% bonus match as well as $25 as a welcome bonus. If you want to make some picks on the fights this weekend, Theragun, the best massage tool in the business. If you work your body and your muscles are sore or tense or tight, an all-in-one massage tool. Sticker Mule, if you own a company, event, or organization and are looking for more promotional and marketing materials, Sticker Mule offers everything from stickers to coasters to magnets to pretty much anything you need for promotion. So head over there, get some custom things done. And then you got Timeless CBD, link in the description, promo code MMA-Hole. Get up to 20% off any of your CBD needs to cure your ailments. And last but not least, Real Bearded Men. If you want a beard as swollen sexy as Mystic Moss, head over there, promo code MMA-Hole, link in the description. 15% off of your entire purchase. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed the brand new intro that we have for Fight Briefing. You'll see it again and again and again, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow for Fook Off Friday. Make sure you guys tune in. Hopefully JBH wins this time so she doesn't have to sing some stupid shit. And can't wait for the fights this weekend. UFC Fight Night 160, UFC on ESPN Plus 18, or UFC Copenhagen, Hermansson versus Cannonier. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Don't be an a-hole. Be an MMA-Hole.